Hi, so in this session, I'm going to talk you through a technique which I call the Carly effect. So, this was inspired by Dr. Kristin Neff, who is really the kind of pioneer in the area of self compassion and the practice of developing self compassion as a foundation really to help you in all sorts of ways, but especially when you are faced with adversity, that you can tap into your own reserves of self compassion to really find ways to kind of be your own best friend, be your own coach, really look at things in a more compassionate way, and often thinking about it in terms, for example, of how you might approach a similar situation if it was happening to somebody that you cared about, and being able to look at it in that way. So she also talks about fierce self-compassion, which I think is especially relevant to women because there are so many instances that you will find throughout life, sometimes even on a daily basis, which perhaps you don't fully acknowledge, but there will be all sorts of instances where you will become aware that your boundary or boundaries are crossed in some way. So this shows up in all sorts of scenarios. It could be something simple like, somebody cuts you up at the lights, or it could be something more, which is often, for example, feeling undermined by somebody. That could be a family member, it could be a colleague. It's quite often that sense in the moment where you become aware of some sort of physical sensation in your body. So an example of a colleague talking to you in a way that you find disrespectful. So anybody being disrespectful to you. You could look at that in a workplace situation because in particular, you will have to be aware of maintaining a level of professionalism and being reasonable within that. So if you feel in the moment that you're being undermined, that your boundaries are being crossed, that you're being disrespected, you're very often you're more likely to want to kind of push through it. It's an uncomfortable feeling. But what I'd invite you to do is to connect with the physical sensations that you get in your body when you've become aware of some kind of breach of your boundaries. That's usually the way it feels. For me, it can quite often feel like a heated feeling or warmth sort of in my chest here. I I definitely feel something in my chest. I'll feel some level of tension. Sometimes it might be even kind of feeling a dry mouth and just having a sense of alertness. Like there's definitely something about that. Um, a kind of personal example for me is where I had a really difficult parents' evening with my child's teacher, a previous teacher that they had. And, I think in previous examples of this sort of situation, I would maybe try to kind of be reasonable or find a way through, maybe change the subject or move on. But in if it was something that was kind of a bit, uncomfortable. But in this instance, it was that what the teacher was focusing on and what they were saying was kind of looking at something negative, one single incident that had happened, which was also questionable. And I felt it. I felt it in the moment. I felt, this protectiveness towards my son, and that what she was saying wasn't fair, and it wasn't a clear representation of what had happened. And so when it showed up, I was very conscious of how do I communicate this? It made me slow down. It made me listen focus on what she was saying, let her finish, and then calmly give my response, outlining the facts about why I felt that her approach was unhelpful. Why was it that she was only focusing on this incident that had happened, which had been dealt with, when we had come to talk more widely about his progress? And could she tell me more about that? So it was a constructive conversation, but it was a firm conversation. And so I've tried to engage that in all sorts of ways, whether that is feeling undermined by a family member or somebody just being difficult with me in whatever scenario it is. That feeling of having boundaries crossed, being disrespected, the one about my son is quite a good one, because very often we're more likely to do it for our children, and we're more likely to do it for others, and to say, no, hang on a minute, I don't accept that, I don't stand for that. But coming back to the example of a colleague, you could apply that in the same way. If somebody was to undermine you or suggest that you don't know enough about a subject, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're not involved in that, then you may feel that again. You may feel a similar sensation. But if you really focus on what they're saying, you take it in and you stick to the facts, and you also really look at being focused on how you regulate your breathing and maintaining that calmness, that's way more effective than losing control or kind of getting caught up in that emotion and then spinning off with it. But welcoming it, appreciating it, thanking it. I've had some of the most kind of rich conversations and meetings where it's been possible to engage with that and then articulate how I'm feeling in the most measured but factual way. And I can even say things like, I can reflect on how I'm feeling. I'm conscious that what you're saying is having a reaction to me. It's making me feel really kind of, you could even say, frustrated. I mean, I've said that in meetings before, where I can see where you're coming from. I can hear what you're saying, but what you're saying is actually quite hard for me to accept, because I've done all of these things over here and I recognize this. And I think also there's something about having awareness of what other people are contributing to this. So you can articulate it in a way which is firm, it's clear, these are my boundaries, this is what I'm about, these are the facts, this is what I'm referring to, which actually honours that rage and brings it into the conversation rather than suppressing it. So in summary, what I would suggest is, where you become aware of, in any way, having your boundaries crossed, being disrespected, being undermined, just take a moment to focus it. Because very often the urge is to get through it or push it down or just sort of pretend it's not happening, deal with it later. I would encourage you to connect with it, sit with it, and in the moment, really get laser focused on what is happening, what's coming towards you, what is it that is sparking this, and how do you bring out that inner Kali, goddess, Indian goddess, inner Kali, that's kind of what I'm talking about, to join that conversation and to be heard, because there's so much damage that's done to women from repressing that. And why should we? We don't have to be agreeable, we don't have to be likeable, we don't have to be what people expect us to be. We want to be involved in the conversation and we want to put our views across. And in order to do that, we've got to connect with our emotions. So I hope that's a helpful exercise. If you are interested in more, then you can check out the resources even on my website, and like, share and follow for more content.